I'm Lyman, and I'm here with my good friend Marcel, and together we do the Jazz and Grass and Other Stuff Too podcast. I'm Jazz, Marcel's Grass, and we have some other stuff too with us today.
Oh man, that's like the worst. That's like the worst superhero introduction. I hate that. Yeah, we have a special guest today. So me and Lyman are both from the same town in Washington, from Bellingham, Washington, and we're joined live in studio by David Lofgren. How you doing, David?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming on. Now, I've got a bone to pick with you. Like, I want to know where the nickname Swab comes from, because I've always heard you referred to as Swab. So I want to know, like, kind of the origin story.
Perfect. So let's see. I'm originally from Maine, and I moved to Bellingham. About 12 years ago. But before I did that, I came to the West Coast to sail on a tall ship on the Lady Washington. And so that was like right after high school. Came out, started sailing on this big historic sailing ship, and that's where I got the nickname Swab. Have you guys ever seen Captain Ron? Are you familiar with that movie?
Captain Ron?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Okay, it's a terrible movie with I think it's Kurt Russell plays like a crazy drunken boat captain, and
that
takes his family. That
doesn't sound crazy at all. That sounds wonderful.
He takes a family out for a sail, and sort of takes them hostage, and their little 8-year-old boy becomes his first mate, and so he starts calling him Swab. And so when I was on the boat, I was like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed 18-year-old, super excited to be there, and everyone else was kind of grizzled and, saltier than I. And so apparently, like on day 2, I was running around doing my engine checks and popped down into the engine room and had my little clipboard and was like, "Hey guys, how you doing?" And the first mate and the engineer were sitting in the engine room watching this movie, Captain Ron, and they had just been having the conversation about how they need to find someone on board to call Swab, like the 8-year-old boy in the movie. And so like I come down the stairs like, "Hi guys," and they're like, "Hi Swab." So that's how that happened, and then it just persists. I've tried to get rid of that nickname for years, and
that's so great.
Finally, I embraced it a little bit. My good friends make fun of me because they say they can tell what kind of situation I'm going into based on how I introduce myself to people I don't know. Like sometimes I'll be like, "Hi, I'm David," and then it's like the cool cats will be like, "Hey, I'm Swab." So these are like two different characters.
Oh man, that's good. Well, I like that we've sort of immortalized it on the podcast.
One of the greatest mysteries of my life has been solved.
Well, anyway, just to give people a little more context, you play a lot of music in Bellingham, Washington, though.
Yes,
what bands are you with right now?
Currently, it got a little bit mellower this past winter, but currently I'm playing with 3 Irish, like traditional Irish bands. So I play the Bodhran for that, actually, like a traditional Irish frame drum. Mm-hmm. And that's Giant's Causeway is sort of the longest running Irish band I've been in. Gallow Glass and then, well, actually, I guess it's just those 2 Irish bands, right? Yeah, and then I play music with Robert Sayers and Blake, who's a singer-songwriter from Bellingham. Play drum set and bow around with him. He sort of does some Irish stuff and a lot of original folk tunes. Mm-hmm. I've been playing with the Stax Brothers. They're a sort of Seattle, now Bellingham-based hard-ass soul is what they've branded their music as, or what we've branded our music as, I guess. That's definitely sort of like the hardest, rockingest band. And that's, there's some other pickup groups and stuff, but that's about it as far as like, serious bands that I'm playing with continuously.
Yeah, man. I know you always keep real busy though. You always got stuff going on. Speaking of some other stuff you got going on, there is a podcast that you run as well.
Yeah, that's right. I started I guess 3 months ago. It's myself and a guy named Andy Rick, another musician from Bellingham, put together a podcast called Little City Big Sound, and that's interviews with Bellingham musicians sort of about their lives and their projects and stuff.
So me and Lyman actually only had you on our podcast so we could sort of railroad you into letting us be on your podcast, sort of, in front of an audience. We don't live in Bellingham anymore, but we did play in Bellingham. I think it's time for us to get that. Yeah. Maybe you should just open it up, just anyone who ever has even heard of Bellingham, whether they play music or not, have them on.
Well, it's funny because the only reason I'm doing a podcast about the Bellingham music scene is because I've been really excited about podcasting as a medium and as an art form, but was definitely sort of, I had so many ideas about what I wanted to do that it was keeping me from just like pulling the plug and doing a podcast of some sort. And so the Bellingham music scene was just like, okay, keep it simple, stupid. Like, I know Bellingham musicians. I know things about music. Talk to them. We'll call that a first step. But I'd love at some point if we could expand it with this podcast to start to talk to musicians who are coming through town or people, right now it's once a month. So it turns out you can only cover 12 people in a year doing it that way, as the math works out. But I would really love, frankly, to be able to have folks from out of town and talk with them. I mean, at a certain point, I'll probably run out of people to talk to in Bellingham.
Yeah, buddy. Right. You don't want to cap yourself off.
I was thinking about doing it once a week, and then someone just said, "Are there 52 interesting people to interview in Bellingham in the music scene?" And I was like, maybe 52, but that second year is going to be kind of hard to come by.
Oh, man.
My first foray into the podcasting realm was 2006. I was 14 years old, and me and a friend of mine in 8th grade decided we wanted to talk about the TV show Lost. So we made a podcast that had exactly one episode.
I didn't even know this.
Yeah, it's not a story I'm exactly proud of. The work is it's not good, but yeah, took a quick 12-year break. Now I'm back.
Man, you got in on podcasting at the ground level. That's impressive.
I like that this is Jazz and Grass, like Jazz and Grass podcast about podcasting.
Yo, dog, I heard you like podcast.
All right. So anyway, I think we got to move on. We got to talk about some music at some point, yeah?
Maybe.
Is that what your podcast is about?
No, it's actually about podcasting. So anyway, So David plays tons of percussion. Is he just covered, right? He's done a lot of stuff with folk groups, and you've done stuff with like rock groups. You've done let's save time and say you've played a lot of different genres, and successfully. So we were going to come at you from the perspective of guitar players, because we're both guitar players and we both played bass too. How would you characterize some of the differences between, string band music that you play with like Robert Blake, and like a full band if you got like horns and electric instruments and stuff like that? How do you approach things? How do you think about things?
Yeah, man, looking at it through those two lenses, it's really interesting. I feel like there's a strong sort of role separation, right? So when you're playing jazz, or when I'm playing funk or soul or something that sort of comes from that, blues for that matter, from that world, I feel like I know where the drums belong. Like I sort of know where their voice fits into the compositions and fits into the way that we as musicians engage with each other, right? It's like I have a role that is to keep time, to sort of set up things that are going to be happening form-wise or melodically. If it's a bigger band, a lot of what you're doing as a drummer is sort of cueing the band to do, I learned this in the big band jazz world, but sort of cueing the band to do these, like go to another section or hit a line, telling the horn players, okay, here's the downbeat for that accent that you're about to play. So I feel like the role for the drummer is really clear in those worlds. As long as you're a student of the music, you sort of understand where you fit in. As soon as it comes to playing string band music or traditional music, bluegrass is interesting because it's such at least it, started out as such a specific sound. Like there is no drummer in bluegrass music, just like there's no saxophone player in bluegrass music,
Yeah.
And I would say that it's probably equally strange to go into that world or go into any sort of traditional music without necessarily knowing how your voice fits in. Like, trying to play with the vocabulary that you learn in a rock setting or that you learn in a jazz setting over a tune that's essentially all it needs is like a simple brush shuffle for the next 3.5 minutes. Like I think it becomes a real discipline to figure out how to blend your voice in a musical way that isn't stepping on toes, that is sort of, honoring the not just honoring the tradition, because some of that stuff gets pretty far out, but at least honoring the sound of the music, which often is not like really loud bass drum, really big hits, giant, fills. So for me, I would say that I, in a lot of ways, I prefer to play the string band stuff because it allows me to be a much more lyrical player, like a much more, it's a lot more about subtlety than it is about like sometimes playing with the funk band or whatever. It feels like you're driving a bus. It feels like you're just sort of trying to keep keep the tempo going, make sure that the bass player and the guitar player are both kind of like on the same one beat. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I like how you pointed out what big band drummers do. That's kind of a really cool comment about how drummers will like write in horn parts in their scores and stuff like that, so they can hit like pops and they can make their parts fit in. And that's not what you do at all if you're playing any kind of folk music. You couldn't be farther away from that. You're super foundational, and you're just staying out of the way, and you're in no way are you as forward and as present as you would be in a scenario like that.
Yeah, totally.
I've got a couple questions for you. Since I think our audience of 12 people minus, like 4 that are probably our parents, but I think the remaining like 2 people, they're probably guitar players. So what I wanted to ask you was, what are things that guitar players do that you like, and what are things that guitar players do that you absolutely hate, so we can avoid them in the future?
What about when we stand on your bass drum? Is it okay if we stand up on the bass drum?
That depends on the drum set that I'm using at the time. If it's a Yamaha kit, go for it. Man, I think it's funny. Talking about guitar players as a monolithic group is, as you guys know, I think that's a mistake. I feel like electric guitar players, the things that I struggle with often, stage volume is a big deal, and this is coming from a drummer, I know. But certainly that idea of how volume and tone interact. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the cause to a certain degree, but I think I've gotten spoiled by getting to play with some electric guitar players that are great at finding tones without needing the volume, to feel good about the tone. And I feel like I'm starting to see people do things like where they'll flip their amps backwards and stuff, like point it off the back of the stage. Especially if you're using a PA system, you don't need your amp for your house volume. So that kind of stuff is really cool. But yeah, there have definitely been times that I struggle just with the volume thing. Although, yeah, again, I'm pretty lucky in that regard. Acoustic guitar players, I don't really, there aren't a lot of things that I feel like I get frustrated with. I think I tend to, the role that I tend to take in a band is definitely as a supporter. So I think rather than feeling frustrated by something a guitar player is doing, if there's something that's sort of rubbing me the wrong way, my tendency is to think, what am I doing that feels bad? I play with one of the guys I play with is like doesn't keep great time, but a lot of the times like my goal then becomes like, how do I match you rather than how do I dig in and like sort of force you to keep my time? And I don't know. So I don't know if that's a legitimate complaint to say you don't keep good time, because I feel like, I don't know. I'm always open. I'm always open for time to be flexible, as long as there's an understanding that that's the situation. Yeah, totally. I don't have too many complaints. I'm sorry.
Man, yeah, we're just trying to make you make enemies, man.
I do my best to make enemies every week. That's my goal here.
We all know that about you, Lyman.
Mm-hmm.
You should do an episode of your podcast with Lyman on, and it could be like an episode of Jerry Springer.
The Lyman throws shade episode. Lyman, what do you dislike about all of the people that you're friends with and play music with?
Literally everything.
Oh man, God. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. It's fun to ask these questions and talk about these things because, I guess in real life outside of podcast world, this isn't really how we talk or generally interact with other musicians. I mean, normally when you ask questions like this, it's about what's greater for the band and what can move a processor of the song or whatever it happens to be. It normally isn't instrument versus instrument. Normally the talk isn't this versus that. So it's fun to hear your answers, and I hope it means a lot to everyone because it's there certainly is good information in there, and it's worth thinking about whether you're a drummer or a guitar player. What about what you do with Irish music? Some of that Bodhran.
Ah, yes.
Do you remember before you start your story? Do you remember when we were at the Bellingham Folk Festival and you came in to grab your drum and I said, "You grabbing that Bodhran?" And as you were walking out the door, you said, "That's not how you say it."
I don't remember that specifically, but probably because that happens so much to me. Yeah, let's see. So the Bodhran, for folks that don't know, and there is no good way to say it unless you have an Irish accent. It's like a Bodhran. I can't really do it right. So Bodhran is about as close as you can get.
You can't even say the name of this instrument.
I can barely play it, and I definitely can't talk about it. It's a frame drum essentially. It doesn't differ that much from the frame drums that are in a lot of different cultures. Traditionally it's a goat skin head and a single frame. Sometimes it'll have a crossbar in the back, but you play it either with your hand or with a stick they call a tipper. And it's really, as far as I know, it's been a part of Irish music for about 100 years. So it's considered a traditional instrument in that context. But it is, for me, it's a really exciting thing to be a part of because Irish music sort of got fairly oppressed when they were under English rule. And there was a big folk music revival in Ireland around the same time that there was a folk music revival in the United States in the 60s. And this instrument has totally taken off since the 1960s and early 70s and turned into a thing where like these 12-year-old kids in Ireland are now playing it with pyrotechnic speed and incredible technique. And it's kind of, I think you guys both approach playing guitar or bass in a very modern way, where it's like you understand the details of how like what good practice is, and how you can take techniques, build vocabulary, from vocabulary become fluent in, a variety of settings. Like you sort of have these very almost like precise ways of approaching building your technique on the instrument. And in a lot of folk music, that understanding, really sort of more of a classical approach, or an academic approach to learning an instrument, hasn't become part of the thing. That hasn't really become part of the tradition.
Oh yeah.
But this drum, that stuff is starting to come into play, and these kids are getting a hold of it and totally changing the way it sounds and the way it's played. So for me, it's a really exciting thing to like. I started playing this instrument and thought, this is dumb. It's a frame drum. It has one head and you hit it with a stick. How hard could it be? And now it feels like there's sort of an arms race of watching these folks take the instrument, and the structure of the way the instrument is built has changed a lot. The way that people are playing it has changed a lot, and the vocabulary that's available, sort of the sounds that you hear people making, allows you to think, okay, cool, I can, if I play my cards right, I might be able to develop a voice on this instrument that isn't just sort of an approximation of a bunch of people that I love, but like maybe something kind of unique.
Yeah, that's how we all feel.
About the Bodhran, are you going to start playing?
No, man. I remember when you tried to show me some of that stuff. That's a really kind of weird technique. So the, what's it called? Is it called the tipper?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you, man, I can't even describe how you hold it. It's almost like the hang loose symbol. In
Hawaii, we call that shaka bra.
You have this stick running through your hand, and it's like a forearm rotation against the drum, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, the motion is kind of like the motion that you use to open a doorknob, right?
Yep.
But like so for those of you listening at home, if you put a pencil in your fingers like you're about to write, that's how you hold the tipper. But rather than the majority of the pencil being, on the top of your hand, the majority of the stick is on the bottom of your hand. And so then you just make that door opening motion, and it's that sort of, 180 degree swing that you're getting. That is how you play the drum. Yeah, it's really bizarre. Again, one of those things that I think was not based on sensible technique. It was just based on sort of people messing around, trying to make sounds out of random things that they had in their kitchen.
So has it increased any other skills in your life? Has your penmanship improved, or your painting, or?
No, if anything, it gives me incredible forearm pain. The first couple of years we played St. Patrick's Day, I would play for like 12 hours a day straight, pretty much, and trying to do that and not having good technique and just drinking all beer and no water. I woke up in the middle of the night with like stabbing pains in my forearm, like Charlie horses almost. It was crazy.
Oh man.
So no, it hasn't improved any areas of my life, actually.
If anything, my life has gotten worse since I started playing. That's good to know.
That's how you know you're on the right path.
So how does the, maybe a little bit of a nerd question, but how does the groove work if you're playing, I guess I got to specify the kind of tune. Let's say it's like a reel, so like a 4/4 kind of tune. When you're playing Irish music, how do you feel like the groove sits? Like, for instance, like we talked about this recently, in jazz music, it seems like the eighth note is, of course, delayed, right? And in bluegrass music, the eighth note is pushed. So one feels like it's laying back, the other feels like it's rushing. Well, both can remain in time, and that's how our grooves are set up. How do you feel like a 4/4 Irish groove fits into that?
Interesting. I would say that both of the realities that you're talking about are represented in Irish music. There's So a reel tends to be fairly straight 4 feel, but so I don't know that your eighth note would get pushed in one direction or another intentionally, at least. But there are 2 other. There's a polka, an Irish polka, has a definitely sort of a push feel to it. It feels like there's a bit of that sort of intentional rush. You're holding time, but you're anticipating the beats a little bit. That sort of would mimic the bluegrass style feel, and then a hornpipe almost has a 12/8 feel, so it's got more of that sort of swing, or the lilt as they call it in Irish music, where you're holding back on, you're almost turning it into a triplet subdivision. Not quite, but there's a little bit of that stutter, or like I said, they call it a lilt. Which is incidentally it's also the word that they use for that. You hear people sort of like making fun of Irish music, and they do that like that's like actually a traditional thing. They would sing the melodies to each other as a form of like imparting the fiddle melodies. It's called lilting the tune. That swing is referred to as a lilt.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird, and there are certain, I don't know the details of it well enough, but I know that there are certain regional differences as well in the feel, in the groove. Some of them definitely swing it a lot more, which for me, I mean, coming from the jazz world, I would say that the way I play the rhythms probably isn't representative of the most traditional ways of playing the rhythms. If anything, it's sort of like, I definitely throw in a lot more backbeats than is probably appropriate.
Yeah.
And also I love playing with sort of the triplet subdivisions inside of the groove, because it's something that I hear because I spent time listening to Billy Cobham or whatever, and there's a little bit of that stuff that sort of like creeps into the Irish tunes.
Yeah, that's cool. I just listening to the lilt in my head and trying to subdivide it against something and trying to feel where it lands against like a triplet or like a dotted 8/16. It's definitely in a different place, and I don't think I ever noticed that. I mean, I've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? I've heard them do that ending improv tune. I've never thought about how that groove felt, though.
I doubt they've thought about it either.
They don't think about much. I think that's the point.
Yeah, it definitely makes for some cool when you get into like the weird folk metal stuff, or even some of the poppier Irish stuff where they have a kit player. You can see, that some of the subtlety is lost, I would say, but you can see where all of a sudden they'll pull out those like, oh, there's really cool polyrhythm over this. I can throw that in, in a way that you never actually, is never actually like explicitly noted in the music.
Man, I think you're the first person to say polyrhythm in our music podcast, so I knew it, man. We have a drummer come on.
Points to you. But this is just like Whose Line Is It Anyway? The points don't matter.
Can you guys tell me what you've been doing previously with this podcast? Like, have you had other guests on? I did no research. I have no idea what
that's fine.
What normally
I don't
happens
expect
here.
you to. We had a guest on last week, Marcel's good friend Nakos Marker. And
oh yeah.
That was wonderful. We talked a bunch about the dobro and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a good one.
Cool. Yeah, Nakos. He's a wealth of knowledge.
And a couple weeks ago, Marcel ditched me, so I asked Miles Harris to guest host with me, and that worked out pretty well. I mean, I talk on the phone with him every week, so like it was just like one of those, except we recorded it.
Awesome. I'll definitely have to go back and listen.
Also, we do edit these, so like.
So
But-
feel free to just dig in on someone hard, and then afterwards be like, "Hey, Lyman, can you cut out that part where I was gonna say something offensive, and then I was like, oh, then we're gonna have to cut out my joke, so I didn't."
Hey, Lyman, can you cut out insert joke here offensive? Haha.
Yeah, there you go. Oh man. Yeah. So, David, when was the first time we ever met?
Oh, wow. I think the first time I met you was we played together in the Hollywood Farmers briefly.
Oh no. Yeah.
Steve Furno.
Oh,
which
man.
which for me was super intimidating because you were playing bass, but you at the time were playing drums in like a Broadway show, like a local version of a Broadway show, and like you would come over and do marching drummer stick tricks and stuff. And I would just look at you and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna play some mellow brush shuffles in the background now.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, I don't play any drums, man. I actually got to play drums at a house party recently. There was a jam, and I got to sit behind a kit and actually play some play some jazz, play some like swing stuff. And they're just playing standards like Sunny Side of the Street and like Scrapple and stuff like that. But man, it was so awkward sitting behind a drum set for the first time in years. I was like, what am I doing?
That's great, man. I should thank you again for giving me all of your drum stuff before you left town.
Yeah, I hope you're taking good care of that, man. There's a lot of stuff.
I've been using it every day. At least some of it.
Is this
That's
a real
good.
thing that happened?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Marcel called me out of the blue. I knew he was leaving town and just said, "Hey, do you want some drum stuff?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, maybe. What do you got?" And then he proceeded to list like all of the things that he owns that are, like a whole drum set, some really nice cymbals. I have to say the thing that's been getting the most use is it's a container full of dried split peas. It's actually a really nice shaker. I've gotten a lot of compliments on it.
Oh man, you need to shoot my mom an email and be like, "Hey, good job on that shaker."
Oh, I will. Love the shaker. And your mom, I can't believe that your mom handmade drum bags for that drum set. It's incredible.
She did. She sewed them herself. Yeah, they're
Wow.
nice too. I can't believe they've held up that whole time too.
Yeah. Well, if whatever she's doing right now doesn't work out, drum bag manufacturing company, she can make her first million. Well, actually, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe she. Yeah.
Oh man.
When was the first time we crossed paths or met? Like what do you remember?
I think the first time we played, I want to say that the first time I met you was when Daniel joined Snug Harbor. Because you guys were, I think you guys were maybe still in high school?
I was still
Or
in
like
high school. I think he freshly
Yeah.
graduated.
Yeah. And that was definitely because Daniel met Will at Whatcom Community College. So these are horn players from a band that I used to play in, sort of the first band that got me going in Bellingham. And Lyman and the trombone player were good buddies, had played together. I met you there, but I don't know if I even knew that you were a bass player for a while until maybe it was at McKay, like I'm at one of those McKay's jams, because we didn't really end up playing together until we did some jazz combo stuff at the Martini Bar or something.
Yeah. The Fireside, right?
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you guys have both, you were both players that I feel like Snug Harbor had been going for a few years and we thought we were kind of hot. And then all of a sudden these kids show up and just start shredding, and I'd be like, oh, maybe we should stop playing out for a while and practice some technique or something.
That's good.
Yeah. So, good on you.
Nice.
Glad you both are following your talents and at least talking and teaching about music.
Yeah,
man,
I
back at
just like BSing with my friends.
Well, you found the perfect way to do that. That's what podcasts are for.
Hey, so David, are you gonna submit some licks for the Jazz and Grass Instagram page so we can have some drummer ridden guitar licks?
Absolutely. It might be a little painful because I'll probably just lay a guitar down and then play some paradiddles on top of it with my sticks or something.
Right, the sticking down. Right, left, left, right, left, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right.
Yeah. It turns out if you tune it to an open G, you can just sort of bang on it and it sounds good. I do have to say that I don't know what the deal is. Who wrote your intro double lick with like the lick, like the jazz lick and like the bluegrass lick mashed together? But that is musical genius right there.
That was all Marcel. He did like all of that, the animation, the composition, everything.
It's insane.
Yeah, man, that was super fun. That was really funny. And I had no idea if Lyman would like it or anything. I think we came up with the name like super late. We were like, hey, we should do some kind of project together. And this is like the first idea we thought of. And then that's the first name we thought of. And then we just went with it. And like the next day I was like, all right, here's like the lick I wrote and the little animation I made. And then it was just all good. Like everything that you see was just like try number one. And it worked out okay.
Yeah, that's what's infuriating about you, Marcel. It's like, I just tried that the first time. Uh-huh. Well, you nailed it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. I hope everyone who's listening to the podcast really, really takes that in, just how great I am.
I think people don't pay attention to the effortless part and effortless mastery. Like you really just have to not try. Like that's the goal.
I don't know how you even teach. Like, I don't know. It just came to me.
Oh, man. So do you have any students right now, David?
No, I fully abandoned the teaching thing, not for any other reason than lack of time. I really, I was teaching quite a bit for a while, drum set and Bodhran. I was doing some group lessons and really enjoying sort of the Bodhran stuff. There's not a lot of sort of preset curriculum for teaching that stuff. There aren't a lot of people who have come up with good ways of conveying the information other than just sort of, person to person or, casually. So I was really enjoying building some curriculum for group lessons for that stuff. But I just didn't have enough time to do all of the pieces. And the issue I was having with teaching was that I couldn't make enough money doing just the teaching, and I couldn't hold down a normal job and be like, I need to leave for an hour and 20 minutes to go teach one lesson, but I'll be back. Oh no, I do have another one this afternoon from like 4:30 to 5:30, if that's cool. It's an admirable thing to commit to that because, I feel like my parents are both teachers. I really place a lot of value in quality education, and it was really hard for me to feel like I was showing up underprepared for the lessons and just sort of BSing my way through it. So yeah. I'd like to do some more teaching in the future, but for now it was just, I had too much on my plate. And really the podcast is like, I've been trying to ditch bands just so I can focus on the podcast stuff. I've been totally unsuccessful so far, but I really want to try and dig into the podcasting stuff a little bit more. I love it.
It's my goal to like eventually just be able to do other things so I can quit performing. Like, just not have to leave my house, essentially.
Podcast here for like musicians trying to get out of music. What's going on with you guys?
Do you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Johnson is sort of the biggest name in online drum teaching. He has a Mike'sLessons.com thing that's like just sort of taken off. Oh, he's ended up becoming it's cool. I like his approach. But I was listening to a podcast with him, and he was talking about how he was in a pretty big touring band in like the late 90s, early 2000s, sort of SoCal based, and they were doing really well. They were, playing like Warped Tour and sort of getting on those like, getting to that level where it looked like things might take off. And he realized that he was kind of miserable, but that he loved the thing that like got him the high that he wanted was teaching. And it was really interesting hearing him talk about how there is a lot of pressure in the music world to have your goal be performance, and then successful performance and bigger audiences, and sort of have that like, that's the thing I want to do, because that's the thing that most of us look at when we're younger and think that looks like fun. And seeing anyone with charisma on a stage do a thing that makes you feel some way is like, how do I become a part of that? But it was really cool to hear him talk about finding the confidence to recognize that music is a massive world that encompasses everything from people sitting in their bedrooms playing because they love the way that their instrument feels in their hands in that little room, to that sort of classic goal of playing big shows for big audiences. But then the teaching side of it. I have a buddy who Justin Smith. We all know him. He's an incredible player, but he loves gear, and so he just started a backline company, because that's sort of, it's like you don't need to spend all of your time just trying to chase the rock stardom, when in reality all of these pieces make the music world what it is. We need the really good teachers. We need the guys who want to spend all their time investing in gear. We need the people who want to open the little shop that doesn't make any money because they love selling starter kits to young musicians, and we need the people who are just our friends who show up at the campfire and pull out the guitar and sing, because that's, without all of those pieces, the quality of what music is in our world, I think, really sort of is degraded. And so it's cool to hear people talk about feeling some pride in like just being a good teacher and not having to be on the road all the time, or just finding your niche that makes you feel good rather than trying to chase what is sort of the goal that's usually, at least popularly set out as, like, be a big player.
Yeah, thanks for saying that so well. That's wonderful advice for anyone who's coming into the industry. I always I don't know. I don't feel a strong dislike for performing or anything like that. I think what I just really enjoy is the communal aspect. I really like a community existing, and I think that moving forward for me, I think that definitely the things I'm going to pick are things that continue to build communities and strengthen communities. And I definitely want bluegrass to have more and more of a foundation online, and I want guitar players to have a place that they can look to start learning bluegrass and stuff like that. I think those are all the choices that I've made. And of course, what me and Lyman have done for people that are interested in jazz and bluegrass licks is the exact same kind of thing. I just hope that a lot of people out there realize that you don't have to be the best and greatest to actually make a career out of something like this. Me and David were even talking on the phone just the other day. We were talking about how for the most part, fans don't even necessarily want to hear from the best and the brightest. A lot of times they want to hear from just other dudes. they want to hear from people who feel like friends. And I feel like the content that I take in is like that too. When I listen to podcasts, or when I watch guitar lessons on YouTube, or when I do any of that stuff, for the most part, the people I watch aren't incredible shredders or anything like that. For the most part, the people that I watch are just kind of people at my level that have good ideas, and I watch them and I'm like, man, that was really smart. I like you, and then I follow their Instagram.
Totally. Well, and the more and more I feel like as the big time music industry seems to be collapsing, in some ways it's hard to feel like, man, all I ever wanted to do was play basketball, and the NBA only has 3 teams now. It's hard to feel that way, but I think in a lot of ways it is refocusing things into that, maybe finding a different way that you can interface with it can be sustainable and can be inspiring in a way that you don't necessarily get from just hearing from those top echelons of players.
It's funny for us too, because we're representing three kind of different worlds. We talk about Irish music or jazz music or bluegrass. Both of those scenes are small enough to only support, like you said, probably like 3 national acts that are, pulling in big bucks for shows. There's tons of mid-level acts, but, like headliners for festivals, there are a few. And we're not gonna land spots with those bands. I mean, we'd all love to, but it's just not gonna happen. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a sad thing. That's not anything to cry about. Yeah, there's What's the name of the group with the Gaelic name that you guys always bring up? It starts with a P.
Lunasa?
Oh no. Maybe I'm wrong.
A group with a Gaelic name? What do you mean?
Maybe that is it. I was just trying to name one of the Irish bigger groups. I guess that is it.
There aren't any.
There aren't any. I beg to differ. Celtic Woman has toured successfully for years.
That's true. And Michael Flatley and the Lord of the Dance franchise is also doing pretty well still.
Man. Yeah, that Flatley stuff, that'd be great if you, I don't know, if you could in some way like dub in the sound of his feet. That would be great. That would be great work for you.
Don't get me wrong. In a second, I would sell out to some giant PBS fundraiser based, ethereal Celtic world show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to make that phone call right now, call David.
You'll find my phone number in the show notes.
Also my home address if you want to mail it. All right, man, you want to move on to our recurring stuff?
I think
Let's
so.
do it.
I think so.
Oh, you're talking to the other host. Sorry, I'll back off.
You can take my spot for today. I'm just sitting here learning stuff. I'm having a great time.
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of that guy anyway.
Recurring segment number 1. This is what I'm drinking out of today.
Oh, nice, man. You don't have a plastic cup. You got a Pepsi.
Yeah.
What's going on, man?
My wife let me have it. I hadn't spilled anything in 4 days, so I got a reward. I got a treat.
We should probably explain to David that most days we do a segment where we see what color cup Lyman is drinking out of. He has to drink out of plastic cups because he's always knocking over and breaking glass ones. Today's a special day, though. He's drinking a Pepsi just for you.
No joke. First podcast. First podcast. As soon as I was done, I immediately kicked over my glass water cup, spilled water everywhere, broke glass, and so my wife put me in plastic timeout. And I still continue to kick them over, but I don't tell her. She doesn't know, because then I will be in sippy cup timeout.
She doesn't watch the podcast either, so everything's good.
Thank God.
Man. So yeah, we normally talk about kind of what we're listening to right now and what inspires us. I guess I'll go first since I'm introducing it right now. So what am I listening to right now? So besides the Little City Big Sound podcast, I guess I'm listening to. No, I've been listening to a lot of Charlie Parker actually, and the reason why is because in our last episode when we had Nakos on, we were talking about a lot of jazz stuff and we were talking about a lot of notation stuff. And in the course of the podcast, maybe you can hear in the background, there's a moment where I try to play the lead from Scrapple and I just can't figure it out, which is funny. Like I know these tunes, it's just been a long time. So I've been trying to work up some of those and get them fluent again. But yeah, it's kind of weird too. A lot of times when I approach that stuff, it's like I'm playing purposefully playing jazz like a bluegrass musician, so I'll like put things on open strings and stuff like that. Like I'm not looking for the closed shapes, so I'm playing them wrong basically. But I've been listening to tons of that. I tabbed out ornithology too, so I'm definitely gonna get that one out. But I don't know what I'm gonna do with them. I just love listening to it anyway.
This week I didn't do as much listening as far as music goes, but I did get 2 audiobooks that I both highly recommend.
So go to audioblocks.com. Use the audioblocks.com/jazzandgrass.
I actually did use somebody's promo code. No, I didn't use somebody's promo code. I did. I went to Audible, #NotSpawn. But I went to Audible and I didn't use a promo code to get my free trial. And I see like everybody and their mother has a promo code for Audible. And I just decided not to use one. I was that jerk off. But
you have no allegiance.
I just want to watch the world burn.
And that's step 1. That's how the world starts burning for you. That's how you slowly deconstruct it. Wonderful.
Not using promo codes.
Code. Yeah.
But I got 2 free books and then immediately canceled my trial because that's how I do.
Lyman.
But the 2 books I got were first one, Gary Vaynerchuk's Crushing It. It's pretty much entirely on social media marketing. And I was listening to it, and there was a story by Sean O'Shea in there, the drummer from Orgone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he stopped doing drum stuff to start like a blog on dog training and is crushing it. That's the title of the book, Crushing It.
Wow.
So what are you going to quit music to start crushing, Lyman?
When or what?
What?
Oh, I was thinking like the Gallagher thing, like just smashing watermelons, like crushing them.
You're going to monetize that? Wait, no, is that phase 2? Is this phase 2 to burning the world?
It's a very long, convoluted process, but it's more like phase 6. And the other book I got was Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, which is really interesting. It's really dense. Like I burned through the Gary Vaynerchuk book in like a day. And this book will probably take me like a couple weeks to just listen to. And I'm not going to get anything close to all of it. But yeah, that's what I listened to this week. I have more for the next segment, I promise.
Can I say it's really nice to hear you, this is ostensibly a music podcast, but then the thing that you have been listening to is a non-musical thing. It's, I don't know. Sometimes I feel really guilty when people are like, what have you been listening to? I'm like, mostly podcasts, like no drummers.
I decided to wear that badge and just own it. Like, I'm not going to lie to the people.
Yeah, we've both done it a couple times, I think.
I like that. I appreciate that. Well, I'm ready to get super nerdy about what I've been listening to.
Oh, yes. Please do it.
Okay, so the first one, but actually both of the things that I've been listening to recently, I feel like I'm really late to the game on. But I just discovered Kamasi Washington. And he is, this is like people saying, hey, what should I listen to for jazz? And you go like, Miles Davis,
Yeah.
Get Kind of Blue. It'll be great. Because all the feedback has been that Kamasi Washington is sort of at the vanguard of the new jazz, the sort of like, young folks doing original music, and incorporating a lot more of sort of contemporary styles into jazz approaches. So yeah, I've been listening to everything that he's put out, and that's heavily changed what my workday feels like. It's really cool, super dense, 2 drummers, incredibly orchestral arrangements, and still like awesome improv sections. So I've been loving that. And then the other thing that I've been listening to, it started out as, I want to remember which order this happened in. I think the first thing that happened is I listened to there's a podcast called 20,000 Hertz, and it's all about sound and sound design. It's a really cool, really cool podcast to check out if you're a nerd about music or audio, anything. But they had an interview with the sound designer for the Broadway play Hamilton, which it turns out is popular and people like.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was listening to that, and that was incredible because they were talking about the sound design that they do for the show, which is insane. It's they mix the entire show line by line. So they mute and unmute every like all 40 channels of different actors as they say their lines, so that they can have perfectly pristine sonic environment where there's no like phasing between the body mics that they wear.
Jesus,
which is crazy. And they also do like live delay programming for their parts where like one of the characters will sing a line, and like 2 words of the line that they sing will be set on a delay to echo back in time with what they're playing. But they do it live every night because the tempos can be slightly different depending on how the night's going. So they're like, they got super nerdy about that. I got super stoked about it. And then I ended up watching a YouTube video where it's the 2 drummers from the pit orchestra running through their rigs in the orchestral pit for the show. And they both have insane drum setups that you should, if you're a drummer into drums, go check out. One of the dudes has, I think, 7 snare drums, because it's all for people who have been living in a cave for the last 4 years. It's a hip hop opera. So it's a, Broadway play that's all sort of hip hop based, or pop music based. And because of that, they have all of the different sort of hip hop snares, the super low tuned, like super fat snares. And then because it takes place during the, late 1700s, there's like a lot of like field snare drum, marching snare stuff too. And one of the dudes is like controlling live Ableton for the entire orchestra to set clicks as the show is happening. So he's like digital music producing for the show as it's happening live, hit it like cueing samples and setting tempos for the click tracks for the orchestra.
Jeez. Yeah.
So I got into it through the nerdiest way possible. But it turns out the music is really good, and the actors have great voices.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
I'm going to check out that podcast for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really cool. And actually all the other episodes of that 20,000 Hertz podcast are like so nerdy and perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. So you want to move on? How about what we're working on right now, yeah?
Yeah, let's go for it. Me first?
Yeah.
I want to go first.
Yeah, you go first, please. What? You're playing a different guitar today?
His guitar.
I found another new chord this week. Surprise, surprise.
Oh, no.
I feel like I discover a new chord every week. And they usually all come out of like this sort of inversion. The drop 2 major 6 or minor 7 voicing. This is A minor 7 or C6. So I think these ones are in D. So I think of that as like a D major 9. So this started by adding changing the C sharp here into a D across all of these inversions. And then I decided I wanted to make this kind of even more minor sounding, which gave me this voicing and this one, which has become my favorite, and this one, which is really hard.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
I'll move my webcam. You guys can't see this, but Marcel can.
Yeah, it doesn't look awkward at all. Super usable.
And the last one is really easy. It's probably one you've used before.
Yeah, totally.
And after doing all those note changes, I looked at this. I'm like, oh, this is just a minor triad with the add 9. But it's a cool way to voice it. And I will include tab and notation for these voicings as well. But this one is my favorite. And so, yeah, been working on like how to sort of like incorporate that into like a 2-5-1 progression.
It's a pretty big stretch.
Yeah, so that's what I've been working on. That's where I've put my time this week.
Cool. I'll go next. We'll save David for last. Yeah. Yeah. So this is not as theory related, but it is equally technical because we're a bunch of jerks. So we when we post on the Jazz and Grass Instagram page, we have to do a little bit of work, right? We have to actually come up with these like ideas, and we have to write them out. We have to do this whole thing, and a lot of times when I go to write out these licks, unlike Lyman, who just writes down whatever, I try really hard to compose something that's interesting and a coherent idea, so on and so forth. But I've been trying to incorporate more country stuff, which is not really what I do. So I've been working a lot on chicken picking, which is really, really, really hard to do. And there's this style called working man blues, and I'll show it to you guys so at least you guys can see it. But yeah, it sounds like this. This is the basic idea. Right, so it's super kind of like rhythm based, right? It's really driving, and I'm grabbing those with my my middle finger and my ring finger, and then I'm picking that constant bass note with my pick. And then when you go to add other things to it, it gets really complicated really fast. Right, you can add a lot to that as you grab different double stops and try to travel around the neck. Similarly, if you travel to different chords, right, you can add all kinds of other different sounds and stuff. It gets just so complicated to constantly be thinking about how you're going to grab your drone again and how you're going to have your pick ready to do that, and then what double stops you're going to grab with your other two fingers, and how those are going to make sense, and also like transition into the next chord, and also be like rhythmically viable and fit into the structure of like, it's kind of got like a 3 and a 4 feel, where most of the passages are like 3/16 notes, and in a bunch of weird places there's like 1/16 note rest. It's just, it feels so good when you actually do it though. When you're on a telly and you're playing it like in a real country way, it feels so real, but it's hard. It's like almost like thinking about 3 lines while you're playing like country blues, like super fast country blues. And it's funny, I feel like this style is kind of like made fun of. It's like the dopey music that happens in like car chases and stuff, and like in like movies that take place in the South. But then you go to actually try it and you're like, oh yeah, this is impossible. I'll never be good at this. I'll never be able to do this. So anyway, yeah, if you follow Jazz and Grass on Instagram, I'm gonna try to do one of those licks. I'm gonna try to make a passage like that I can post on there. But I think it's gonna have the most notes of any lick I've ever posted on there. This will be the notiest lick.
I've got my work cut out for me because I have to win. I have to make a lick with more notes than that now.
Yeah, right. 30-second note triplet licks.
Yeah. With double and triple stops.
Yeah, of course.
Wait, so you guys sometimes pluck the strings and have your fingers on them, and then sometimes you pluck the strings and you just move your fingers and it plays other notes?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Wow. Cool. Okay, let me grab my guitar here and I'll show you the licks that I've been working on.
Oh, I can't wait.
No. So this the thing I've been working on this week is, I think it's an interesting topic of conversation, at least, because a friend of mine, Aaron Guest, invited me to play a show with him where he's releasing a solo album that he recorded, and he's a multi-instrumentalist, so he recorded all the drum parts, the bass parts, the keyboard parts, and the vocals, guitar parts by himself. And so now I've been tasked with taking the recording and then reverse engineering it to figure out what he played for those drum parts, which I think is so, it's, I often can feel confused about how to approach practicing for a gig versus how to approach practicing for sort of self-betterment. And that it's been really interesting for me to develop this technique for trying to prep for a gig, especially when I don't have a lot of time. So what I've been doing and what I've sort of been honing over the last year or two is I realized for myself that I am much more efficient if I sit down, listen to a song, and transcribe it into music notation without touching my drum set, because it forces a really deep listening on my end that I don't think I necessarily do if I'm sitting behind my kit, I'm listening to a tune, and I'm like, my tendency is like halfway through I'll start to play along, and I'll sort of like approximate the grooves or whatever. They're the pieces that and certainly, playing in a pickup band or learning like top 40 covers or whatever, most of the time that's totally fine. But when I'm playing in a band where the guy who played the drum parts on the record is sitting next to me playing the bass part for the show or playing the keyboard part for the show, I want him to know and to be able to hear that I've learned the parts the way he wrote them, whether they were intentional or not. So that's sort of what I've been spending a lot of time transcribing parts. And it's funny because I showed up for my first rehearsal with him having not actually played any of the parts on the drums. I just had enough time to transcribe the parts. So I don't know how do you guys prep for a gig in a way that's separate from just sort of working on your own chops? So I was wondering if there are instances where you guys are going into a gig. How do you balance time management with trying to how do you most efficiently prep to be able to go in, play a tune well that you're learning, without having to just do the I'll listen to it 40 times and play along?
Well, I actually had a scenario where I took on a gig with a gal, and I only had I had very limited rehearsal, and we were going to play a 3-hour show. So there was, well, you guys know that's a lot of songs normally. So some of them were covers and a lot of them were originals, and I had to write out my own parts for the originals. And just like I think I took almost the exact same approach that you did. For the most part, I didn't want to touch my guitar, and I wanted to chart out all the songs, and I charted them all out by hand in a little notebook, which is kind of different from me. Normally, I do everything on the computer. I don't handwrite a lot of stuff, but I handwrote all of it, And then when I went to write my own parts, I tried really hard to kind of stay out of the way, but write something that was interesting. And yeah, I did very limited rehearsal. And so, a lot of times when I went in to play those songs for the gig, I hadn't played them all the way through, but I had an idea of what my part was going to be and how it was going to work out. And luckily, she's a super consistent performer. So the recordings that I did see from her online and that she sent me were almost identical to what happened at the show. Very, very little anything changed. So that's really good and trusting. Sometimes you take gigs with people and you've heard some recordings or you check recordings online and then you show up and something completely different happens. And
totally.
not that that's bad or scary or anything. Most of the time you can kind of roll with it, but I'm glad that didn't happen. But yeah, that was my most recent experience with that. And honestly, it's one of the only experiences I've had with that of recent memory. Normally in the bluegrass world, it's like jazz. We're all playing standards. You just show up and you know what to do.
Totally.
Hopefully
I have to say,
explodes.
There's nothing like, it's a great sort of, amateur pro, quasi-pro hack is like if you show up with sheets full of like actual notation on manuscript, it doesn't matter if it's not for the gig that you're playing. If you show up to the rehearsal or the gig with like their tunes apparently charted out, there's sort of a like, oh, this person must be serious, So it's a nice, it's a good look. I guess
people are surprised you can speak the arcane language of sheet music.
Totally.
I find when I have to like learn, I haven't learned somebody's original music in quite some time, but when I have to come to a rehearsal and learn with a bunch of stuff learned, I find like I just really have to trust my instincts. I'll do preparation. I'll usually come with a Kindle with a bunch of notes and things charted out about the form. I just have to trust my instincts, and I feel like if my band members don't trust me, like I'm gonna have like a problem, because if they're not trusting me, I'm not gonna trust my own instincts as well, and the wheels might fall off. So that's just something I've been thinking about, is a large degree of trust between you and yourself and your fellow musicians.
Yeah.
If you just trust each other, it'll probably end up better than if you didn't and you maybe tried to micromanage. I don't know.
Do you guys ever have that thing happen where you well, David kind of talked about this a little bit, but a lot of times when you go to learn a new tune and you do it with your instrument in your hands, you like come across weird stuff, and you kind of address it real quick. You roll through it. It's not a big deal, just like you would at a show. But you have this like moment in your mind where you're like, oh yeah, I'll remember that. And then you never do.
Totally.
Every single time.
And that's the number one reason why you should actually take some time to chart something out.
As I'm getting older, I'm realizing that that feeling of I'll remember that it's never reliable in all of life, any aspect of it. I'll remember that. No, you won't.
I mean, I'm just trying to take better notes as I'm getting older. Like the more detailed that my notes are, the better.
My whenever I teach things and whenever I'm just sitting at my desk, I just cover the place with sticky notes. And then when the sticky notes develop, to there's no more room for new sticky notes, then I'll take the first layer and I'll stack them on top of each other and fold it in half and put it somewhere. Knowing that should I need to reference those old sticky notes, there is a pile of dusty sticky notes somewhere for me to go back to.
That's your brain system now, is just piles of sticky notes by day.
Yeah, and it works well for lessons if I'm trying to like recall exactly what I said and what we talked about. I like to take notes like through Skype lessons, and then they develop in layers.
Have you thought about digitizing them?
Yeah, the majority of what I do is online. Like I said, I really the only thing I handwrite are these bizarre sticky notes. Like, for instance, one says is about a lesson I taught a couple days ago where this guy's wife asked if I knew any banjo teachers that teach Skype lessons online, and I didn't know. So I wrote this sticky note because I have no idea where I would put that. I don't want to clutter up my Google Keep. Like, for instance, this one, I don't need this one anymore. So I'm not even going to fold it up. I don't need it. I don't need to reference that. I'll just put it over there.
I watched him throw it over there. Like, you can't see it, but I can. It was fun.
Marcel, it just dawned on me that your video feed is in black and white. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I do my video feed in black and white because it's easier for people to see my guitar frets when I teach Skype lessons. There's actually a real reason.
Good
Yeah, and I don't
call.
know. I don't know why that is exactly. I don't see a huge difference, but at one point a student said that it asked if I could do that because some other teacher did it. And ever since then, I've done it.
Well, you look super classy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm stealing that. I'm gonna do that.
Feel free to steal this made up thing. It's very snake oily.
So I think we're hitting the tail end here.
Yeah, man. That was fun though. Man, thanks for being here, David.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. This is outside of my own podcast. This is the first podcast I've been on.
Well, if you ever want to be on a Lost podcast, I know someone who could hook you up.
Man, you're a pro. You just wrapped it back around to the very beginning. We have to end it now. That was perfect.
Man. Anyway, all right, so let's go through this stuff. My name's Marcel. I'm so glad that you've watched this podcast. If you're looking for anything that involves me, you can find that all on YouTube. That's Lessons with Marcel. There's 3 other places you can find me. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out my website, lessonswithmarcel.com. That's where you can sign up for Skype lessons. There's also a ton of free guitar lessons on there that you can just check out right now. So please go do that. I think that's it for me. That's everywhere you can find me.
I'm Lyman. You can find me at lymanlipke.com, and that'll lead you everywhere that I am on the internet that I want you to find me.
Don't look any harder than lymanlipke.com.
Everything in those background check websites is a lie.
So the Juicebox podcast.
Yeah.
What about you, David? Where can the people find you?
My name is David Pender Lofgren. I'm the host of Little City Big Sound, a podcast about Bellingham's local music scene and the people and voices that make it what it is. You can find us at littlecitybigsound.com or by emailing us at info@littlecitybigsound.com. You can also find us on Facebook or on Instagram. I don't think I know anyone with Twitter, so I don't have that.
Nice, man. Of course, the thing that me and Lyman do together is the Jazz and Grass Instagram account. I didn't talk about our numbers. What are we at? We're at like 590.
591. We may be back down to 589. I'm gonna check right now.
Yeah, I love this. We talk about it in every podcast and then we upload out of order. 593 right now.
Yes.
Oh man, 7 people go follow us so we can hit that 600.
Should we announce that we're gonna do something special for 1K?
Yes, go ahead.
So I've played with Marcel before, like in a bluegrass setting, but I was playing bass, so I know literally next to nothing about bluegrass guitar. But as soon as we hit 1,000 followers, we are going to switch off for a week, and I'm gonna play some bluegrass licks, and he's gonna play some jazz licks on your Telecaster.
Oh yeah, so that means you're gonna get 3 jazz tele licks and 3 whatever acoustic guitar you have bluegrass licks.
It's a Takamine that was gifted to me by a dear friend of mine.
That's bluegrass.
It's actually
as
a
hell.
ukulele, but you know, whatever.
Oh man, love it.
So yeah, that should be interesting. probably bad on my end, and at the very least, kind of funny.
Only misinformed on my end. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This was a lovely little podcast. Is there anything else you want to say, Lyman? Are we out?
Is there anything else you want to say, David?
Nope.
Cool. That's how it ends.
All right. Yeah, we'll see y'all next time.